Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're really getting into some fascinating stuff. We're going to be looking at lost knowledge of the ancients.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was edited by Glenn Kreisberg. And, we asked listeners to send us excerpts that they thought were really interesting, and boy, did they deliver. We got stuff about, everything from paranormal phenomena in ancient Egypt to the possibility of, cyclical history and all sorts of wild stuff.
Yeah, that's a really interesting collection.
Yeah. So we're going to try to figure out, is there actually any evidence for any of this, about lost civilizations or...
Could these theories change how we view history?
Yeah. And ourselves.
Yeah. Potentially even ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our mission today.
A pretty bold idea, right? That entire civilizations, potentially more advanced than our own, have just vanished.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So the first excerpt that really kind of jumped out at me was by this guy, Dr. Robert Schoch.
And he goes right into the deep end right away, into parapsychology. Mm-hmm. And he makes a really good case for telepathy and psychokinesis and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
I know. And those crisis apparitions? Have you ever heard of those?
I've heard of them, yeah.
Where somebody sees a loved one in danger at the exact moment it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Or poltergeist cases, objects moving around on the phone.
Yeah.
It's creepy, right?
Yeah. That kind of stuff definitely challenges our understanding of the world.
It really does. And so Schoch says that, just because we can't replicate these events in a laboratory setting doesn't mean that they're not real,
Makes sense.
He compares it to, I don't know, a volcano. We can't create that in a lab, but they obviously exist.
Exactly.
I think that's a great point.
I do too.
Mm.
But then doesn't that make these things hard to study?
Well, yeah. That's one of the big challenges in this field, right? How do we
understand these things that we can't really, control the environment? And Schoch actually suggests that maybe our scientific methods just aren't, equipped to measure or really understand these phenomena.
Okay.
And he proposed a really interesting idea that maybe human consciousness has varied over time.
Oh.
Maybe in the past, people were just more in tune with these subtle energies or forces.
So you're saying that maybe our ancestors kind of experienced reality differently than we do today?
Right.
Wow.
It's a pretty wild thought.
It really is. Makes you wonder if all those stories that they wrote about those paranormal experiences they had, maybe that was just...
maybe that was just a different way of perceiving the world.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So then that ties into... cyclical history, that idea that maybe civilization goes through these cycles, of advancement and decline, and that even our understanding of reality and consciousness kind of shifts along with it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea.
So, okay, let's talk ancient Egypt, because Edward F. Malkowski, in one of the excerpts, dives into the world of Egyptian mystery schools.
Okay.
And he makes the case that they might have held this incredible knowledge that even, and get this, might connect to modern scientific concepts.
You mean, are we talking quantum physics?
Are we talking about for the ancient Egyptians?
I know, right?
That's a big claim.
It's a big claim.
Yeah.
Well, Malkowski seems to suggest that might be a possibility.
Wow.
And he analyzes the temple of Amun-Mut-Konsu. Have you ever heard of that one?
I have heard of that, yeah.
At Luxor.
Yeah.
Okay. And he thinks the architecture is not just about, religious deities.
Okay.
He actually sees it as this deep understanding of human nature and the cosmos.
Really?
Yeah. And these figures actually representing principles of nature and maybe even consciousness itself. So you're saying the ancient Egyptians may have built a temple.
Yeah.
It's like a giant
I know, it's crazy.
model of consciousness.
Yeah. But how does he connect that to quantum physics?
Well, Malkowski draws this parallel between the Egyptian concept of Amun, the hidden force.
Okay.
And the idea of an energy field in modern physics.
Okay.
That kind of pervades everything.
Right.
And he also points to the Egyptian concept of and this is getting a little complicated, but state vector collapse.
Okay.
Which is basically the idea that the universe exists as a wave of possibilities.
Okay.
And until an observer kind of collapses it into a single reality.
Okay. So I might be totally oversimplifying this.
Sure.
But are you saying they believe that consciousness literally shapes reality?
That's kind of the essence of the argument. Yeah.
And they represented this in their architecture thousands of years ago.
Yeah. It's a really interesting
That's wild.
perspective that challenges us to really reconsider how sophisticated these ancient cultures might have been.
Right. It makes you think, like, if they had this kind of understanding,
Exactly.
what else might they have known that we've just totally lost?
Right.
Okay, so we've got potentially fluctuating human consciousness affecting our view of the paranormal.
Right.
And now ancient Egyptians potentially encoding this advanced knowledge in their architecture.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, let's look at another theory about the ancient Egyptians that suggests they had some knowledge
Okay.
that goes way beyond what we typically think they had.
Yeah.
Robert Bauval and his Orion correlation theory really shake things up.
Okay.
He says that the pyramids at Giza,
Okay.
they're not just tombs, they're part of a much grander design.
Pyramids as more than tombs. Most people just think they're, burial sites for pharaohs. Like, what's Bauval's take?
He goes way beyond that. He's saying that the layout of the pyramids at Giza, like specifically those three big ones, mirrors the stars in Orion's belt. But it doesn't stop there. He actually suggests that the whole Giza plateau is like a cosmic Egypt.
A cosmic Egypt?
Yeah, it's this massive blueprint that reflects the heavens, and it might even, span thousands of years and miles.
Okay, so he's saying that the ancient Egyptians designed these massive structures to align with certain stars.
Right.
But how does that connect back to this idea of lost knowledge? Was it just, showing off their astronomy skills, or was there something more to it?
Well, his theory implies that they had a really deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics.
Yeah.
Like way beyond what we typically give them credit for. Remember we talked about the wobble of the Earth's axis?
Yeah.
Like precession?
Yeah.
Bauval thinks they knew all about it.
Oh, wow.
And actually incorporated it into the design of the Giza complex.
So they understood these complex astronomical cycles.
That's the idea.
But wouldn't that be insanely hard to prove?
Well, that's the debate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some people just dismiss it as pseudoscience. Other people find it really compelling because they think it challenges the conventional timelines
Right.
and our assumptions about what these civilizations were capable of.
Yeah, if it's true, it's definitely a big aha moment.
For sure.
So speaking of seeing things in a new light, this next excerpt talks about Mark Booth.
Okay.
And he goes into alternative history and esoteric philosophy.
Right.
And he argues that there are these deeper laws that govern history, forces that we don't really understand, and that's pretty different from, the typical way we look at history, like just focusing on the facts and what happened.
Yeah, he's looking for those hidden patterns and synchronicities.
Right.
The things that suggest there's this underlying order that goes beyond just the material world.
Right. I was reading about this publisher. He picked up Booth's book. It's called The Secret History of the World.
Okay.
And he totally changed his worldview.
Right.
After writing this book, he just started seeing everything differently. Why do you think Booth's work had such a big impact on people?
I think he just has a way of making you question everything you thought you knew
Right.
about history. And he opens your mind to the possibility that there's just more to reality than meets the eye.
Okay.
And that maybe the ancients did have this knowledge that we've just lost.
Right.
And we're just now starting to rediscover it.
Okay. That's kind of like what Dr. Schoch was saying about human consciousness.
Right, exactly.
Maybe fluctuating over time.
Yeah.
If there are these deeper laws,
Yeah.
could they be influencing how we perceive reality? Maybe even explain paranormal experiences?
It's a good question. Booth actually talks about this.
Does he?
He draws parallels between the work of alternative historians and the experiences of mystics and visionaries throughout history.
Oh, wow.
So he suggests that these people might be tapping into this different level of perception.
Okay.
And that reveals this hidden order to the universe.
So we've got monuments that might be encoded with this cosmic knowledge. Right. We've got these hidden patterns in history.
Yeah.
Ancient wisdom that's just waiting to be rediscovered.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, let's shift gears for a second and talk about something a little more tangible.
Okay.
The Antikythera mechanism.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. This was discovered over a century ago in a shipwreck. And it really challenges our understanding of ancient technology.
I don't really know a lot about it. What was it, a tool or a weapon or something?
It's way more complicated than that. Imagine a clockwork computer.
A clockwork computer?
Yeah, with all these intricate gears and dials. And it can actually track the movements of the sun and moon and planets.
Really?
With incredible accuracy.
Wow.
It even predicted lunar phases and eclipses.
That's amazing. Like a computer from ancient Greece.
That's what it is.
Wow, why haven't I heard more about this?
Well, it's still kind of shrouded in mystery.
I guess so.
But it's so complex that it doesn't really fit with what we think about ancient Greek technology. So some people are even suggesting that it might be evidence of an even more advanced civilization.
Oh, wow.
That predates the Greeks.
Like their knowledge was passed down or something?
That's the idea, yeah.
So lost civilizations with advanced knowledge, maybe even influencing cultures like the Greeks. It's like every piece of this puzzle leads to more and more questions.
And challenges our assumptions about the past.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot to take in. We've covered so much paranormal stuff, Egyptian mysteries, now an ancient Greek computer. What's next in this lost knowledge of the ancients journey?
Well, let's go back to that idea of cyclical history.
Okay.
Walter Cruttenden really dives into this concept.
Okay.
And he connects it to a fascinating astronomical cycle called the precession of the equinoxes.
Back to cyclical history. We touched on this with Dr. Shook and how it relates to human consciousness. But what is this precession of the equinoxes thing? And how does Cruttenden tie it into this grand cycle idea?
Okay, so imagine a spinning top.
Yeah.
As it slows down, it starts to wobble, right?
Yeah.
And its axis traces a circle. Well, that's kind of what's happening with the Earth.
Really?
Because of these gravitational forces from the sun and moon, our planet's axis actually wobbles a little bit.
Huh.
And it makes a full circle roughly every 25,800 years. That's precession.
So the Earth's axis is like constantly shifting.
Yeah.
And it takes thousands of years to make a complete cycle.
Right.
But how does that affect us? How does that tie into human history?
Well, that's what Cruttenden's getting at.
Okay.
He calls this cycle the Great Year.
The Great Year. Okay.
And he thinks it's not just an astronomical thing. He argues it's a driving force behind, like, the evolution of human consciousness.
Oh, wow.
And how civilizations develop. And he points to all these ancient cultures around the world that had this cyclical view of time, you know, with all those myths and stories about golden ages, followed by periods of decline.
So there's this cosmic clock that's influencing our history.
That's what he proposes.
With civilizations, like rising and falling in these predictable patterns.
Yeah. It's a pretty bold idea.
It is. I mean, shouldn't we have noticed this by now if it was so obvious?
Well, he breaks down the Great Year into these different ages.
Okay.
Each with its own, like, characteristics and influence on human consciousness. He believes we're currently transitioning from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius.
Okay.
Which is often associated with spiritual awakening and, you know, big technological advancements. It's pretty interesting to think about how these ancient cycles might be playing out, you know, right now in our world.
It kind of reminds me of that saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Maybe these cycles aren't about exact repetition, but, you know, just broad patterns that affect human behavior and how our society develops. Makes you wonder if there are other cycles at play that we haven't even figured out yet.
Absolutely.
But if civilizations have been, you know, rising and falling for thousands of years,
well,
what happened to the ones that came before us? I mean, is there evidence that some of them were even more advanced than we are today?
That's the big question.
Right.
And it leads us to Graham Hancock and his work on, well, the first Americans.
Okay.
He challenges the traditional narrative about, you know, a single migration wave across the Bering Strait.
Right.
He thinks the Americas were actually populated by a much more diverse group of people.
That reminds me of his book, Fingerprints of the Gods. He talks about, like, evidence of a lost advanced civilization, maybe hidden under the oceans.
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of evidence does he have for this, you know, more diverse population in the Americas?
Well, he points to a few things, like the Olmec heads in Mesoamerica.
Okay.
These massive stone sculptures. And they have these distinctly African features.
Really?
Yeah. Which suggests maybe there was some kind of transatlantic connection back then.
Wow.
He also looks into the possibility of, like, ancient Chinese influences in some American cultures.
Oh, wow. That would really change how we understand history.
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Those are some bold claims, especially considering that, you know, most people still believe the Bering Strait theory. How has, like, the scientific community responded to Hancock's ideas?
Well, a lot of academics are pretty skeptical. You know, they tend to stick to those traditional timelines and interpretations of history. But his research does make you think.
Yeah.
It raises important questions about our own biases. Like, are we truly open to evidence that challenges what we think we know?
It's like what we were saying about the Antikythera mechanism. Just one artifact can completely upend our understanding of history.
It really can.
This last excerpt takes us to the end of the Pleistocene era, like 12,000 years ago. What happened then that might be relevant to our discussion?
Well, that was a time of massive upheaval.
Okay.
Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and maybe even a pole shift. All of that drastically changed the Earth's climate and landscape. It would have been catastrophic for any civilization around at that time.
Hold on, a pole shift. You mean like the Earth's axis of rotation suddenly changing?
Yeah, it sounds crazy, right? Like something out of a movie.
It does. What evidence do we have that this actually happened?
Well, the book talks about Charles Hapgood's work.
Okay.
He came up with this theory of Earth crust displacement.
Earth crust displacement.
Yeah, to explain these rapid pole shifts.
Okay.
It also mentions the idea that, asteroid impacts, while obviously devastating, they could potentially trigger these shifts too. Like the Earth's crust could move really quickly and dramatically,
Wow.
causing massive floods, earthquakes, volcanic activity.
It's kind of scary to think about, a whole civilization, maybe even an advanced one, just wiped out like that.
Yeah.
And all their knowledge lost.
It is. Makes you realize how powerful nature really is.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think there's a connection between these events and those myths about a universal flood that are found in so many cultures?
That's a great question. Could they be like a collective memory of a real event?
Yeah.
A flood that was so massive it reshaped the world and wiped out entire civilizations.
Wow, what a deep dive this has been. I mean, we've covered so much ground. Paranormal phenomena, ancient Egyptian mysteries, a possible ancient Greek computer, and now these potentially world-altering cataclysmic events.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? All these alternative theories and how much we still don't know about our past.
It does. What's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I'd say stay curious. Keep an open mind. Don't be afraid to question what you think you know and explore different perspectives. The search for lost knowledge never really ends. There's always more to learn.
Well said. And as you continue your own exploration into these mysteries, ask yourself this. If ancient civilizations were more in tune with the Earth's energies and cycles than we are today, could that explain why they built those megalithic structures all around the world? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into lost knowledge. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring.